Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. Stories to listen to when you drive. Volume 14, story number 1. The incident took place in Austin, Texas on August 14th, 1995, between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. A friend of mine, who I shall call James, had been going through some bad times as of late. He had been suffering from partial paralysis from an injury he had sustained years ago in a diving accident. His business was failing, his bank account was dwindling, and since he had lost his lease with the apartment he lived in, he had to live with a friend until he could get back on his feet. As sometimes happens in all of us, James lost hope and felt that there was no way out, and so he committed suicide. I was told about this the next day by a mutual friend of ours. A bunch of us got together later to remember him and grieve. 2 nights later, while at a payphone at the corner of South Lamar and Barton Skyway, a well-lit street corner, I was talking to a lady friend when I caught a glimpse of something moving out of the corner of my right eye. I looked to my right across the street and saw James. He was walking without any sign of paralysis at all. He looked completely solid. As he walked, he looked at me, smiled, and nodded, and then disappeared. Oddly enough, I was not frightened by the experience, but I sure was surprised. I went and told another mutual friend of ours of my encounter, and he told me that he had heard that James' sister-in-law had also seen him. According to her report, she was making some sandwiches in the kitchen of the house she shared with her husband, Drew, which was James' brother, when she felt a chill followed by the feeling that she was being watched. When she turned around, James was standing in the doorway in the kitchen a few feet away from her. He spoke to her saying, "I'm okay, everything's all right. Where's Drew?" She screamed and he disappeared. She and I are the only ones who saw him. 2 days later, James was taken to Dallas and laid to rest there. As far as I know, his ghost has not been seen since. Story number 2. This happened back in 2003. One day my cousins told me about a road that was believed to be haunted. It was located in Sanger, California, a small rural town about 20 miles from where I lived. The name of the road was Channel Road, but was dubbed Snake Road by the locals because it was very windy with many sharp twists and turns. It also runs alongside a river. Legend has it that a young mother and her 2 daughters perished there. The mother apparently failed to negotiate one of the sharp turns and careened off the roadway late one night. She was thrown from the car and died almost instantly. Her daughters, meanwhile, were trapped in the vehicle, which ended up in the river. Unable to escape, they eventually drowned. Their bodies found in the car about a mile downstream from where their mother died. Since that time, many people have said that they have seen the young mother walking along the road and the riverbank looking for her daughters. I'll admit, I was a little intrigued, but also very skeptical. After much pleading and begging by my cousin, my friend and I said we would drive them down it. We got a map of Sanger and located Channel Road. We set off for it about 9 p.m. We followed directions to a T, but weren't able to locate it. A few reasons being that it was in the sticks. Almost the whole entire area was a mass of trees, weeds, overgrown bushes, and trash. You couldn't even tell what street you were on because a lot of the signs were buried somewhere in the overgrown bushes. About an hour of driving, low on gas and frustrated about not being able to find the road, we decided to head home. It was at that point that I realized I had no idea where I was. I figured that since I lived south of Sanger that I would take a road that went in that direction. I turned into the first street that I came upon. The name of it was obscured by the bushes, but hey, it was going south. We were on the road for approximately 2 minutes when my cousin, who had fallen asleep in the back, suddenly woke up. She started whimpering, at first saying she was scared and wanted to go home. A few minutes later, she began yelling and screaming for us to hurry up and get out of where we were. I showed her that we were trying to do that, but there was no calming her down. I sped up and was going probably about 65 miles an hour on this dark country road. Up ahead, about 50 yards in front of us, I saw this small patch of fog. I say fog. My friend says it was an apparition. I slowed down as I came closer to it, but as I got closer, it began to evaporate. By the time I came up on it, I was probably going about 15 miles an hour. By the time I reached it, it had gone. I passed the area where it was and was about to speed up when I noticed a faded sign that said, "Dangerous curves ahead." A sign that I probably would not even have seen if I'd continued at the rate of speed I was going. In the back of my mind, I thought, could this be Snake Road? But quickly dismissed the thought because the road so far ahead had been pretty straight. But the sign didn't lie. About a quarter mile up ahead, I suddenly came upon a series of sharp twisting turns. I would drive about 20 or 30 yards and have to make a sharp turn right. Then another 20 or 30 yards and suddenly have to turn left, and so on. This went on for about 3 miles when the road finally straightened out. I drove about another 2 miles and noticed some blinking red lights up ahead. As I got closer, I saw that it was a stop sign. Upon coming closer to it, I told my friend to look and see if the street name was visible, and maybe we could have some idea where we were. I'll never forget the look on her face when we got close enough for her to see the sign. All the color seemed to have drained from her face. She said, "You guessed it. The road was Channel Road." We took off as fast as we could, and my cousin, the only one who freaked out as soon as we got on the road, calmed down as soon as we turned off of it. I am skeptical no more. I do believe wholeheartedly that the apparition we saw was that of the young mother, and I do not believe she was there to scare us, but quite the contrary. I do believe she saved our lives, because had she not appeared before us, I would not have slowed down, but would have continued at the high rate of speed that I was going. I would have missed the faded sign and would have come upon the dangerous curves at breakneck speed, and may have suffered the same fate as this young woman and her two daughters. As a postscript, in January of 2004, my grandparents were looking to buy another house. They narrowed it down to two houses, one of them being on Channel Road. One of the pictures the realtor showed them was a wide view of the riverfront home, and in it, about approximately 5 yards from the house, you can see a sign that says, "Dangerous curves ahead." We advised them that if they purchased the house, we would never, ever visit them. Next story. My husband and I had moved to a small house by the lake in Wisconsin. Our first child had been born in February of 1998, and it was 2 months later, while we were up with a baby around 3 a.m., that my encounter first happened. We were sitting on our couch talking, and I got up to get the baby a bottle. I stood up and could not move anywhere. I was dragged across the room to the front door. I could make out a cloudy outline in front of me. It was in front of me and pushing me backward, but I could not make a sound. My arms were flailing, and everything happened so quickly. After about 20 seconds, I could scream, and scream I did. "Let's get the hell out of here." As we were leaving, the sound of music stopped me. My husband saw what had happened to me, but did not hear or see what happened next. In my hallway was a sight I will never forget my whole life. I saw a ballroom from the late 1800s or early 1900s with people dancing. It was very cloudy, but I could see the people dancing. I could hear the people talking and the music playing. The man that had pushed me across the room was dancing with a lady. The man had a white wig on, and he looked at me, and an incredible feeling of sadness arose in me from them. I was no longer scared, but did not understand. For the next 2 months we lived there, I would smell smells and hear the music, but never saw anything again. To this day, I still wake up almost every night at the same time, 3 a.m. Next story. While on holiday in Cornwall with my mom and her friend, I saw a sign for a ghost walk when we visited the Artist's Paradise of St. Ives. As we weren't staying far away, my mom and her friend agreed to come back later with me. Mom is not into ghosts, but her friend, who lost her husband 2 years ago in an accident, does to a certain extent. Now, I went on a ghost walk in London once, and it was stories being told and actors dressed up, but this was nothing like it. As we walked around the town, it was quite blustery, and occasionally there was a slight drizzle, but it wasn't that cold. Our guide encouraged us to listen and tell him of any experiences before he told the stories, so when the odd person told him of things, we were amazed to find out how they were connected to local hauntings. In the middle of the town was a small paved garden with a couple of benches and some plants. Our guide told us that if we were willing, he would like us to stop and close our eyes in the garden and tell him what we felt. He said he would wait on the other side of the road. I did as I was asked, but couldn't hear anything. It was silent, and I just presumed that it was because the other 12 people in the tour group were quiet. All I felt was an icy cold gust of wind that hit the left side of my face, blowing my hair in front of my face, which was a bit strange as my hands weren't cold. My mom laughed at me when I opened my eyes, so when we were asked to tell the guide of our impression, I listened with amazement as many claimed he thought they heard children laughing, but he wasn't sure as it could have come from the car radio of a passing car. Another woman said that, like me, all she heard was silence. Our guide stroked his beard thoughtfully and told us of a young woman whose youngest son of 8 died of cholera. She and the surviving children would come to this garden to mourn him. A few months afterward, she died herself. The guide told us that he had a daughter of the same age, and so he wouldn't stay in the garden, but people in previous tours had told him of hands tugging at skirts, and one woman, who said she was a psychic, said she could see children running around. I didn't see or hear anything else that I thought could be out of the ordinary on this tour, but a couple of others did. Could it be that I just wasn't psychic enough? Next story. It was 1982 and my parents had recently divorced, and I would go to spend weekends with my father. He had recently bought a new house, one that could kindly be called a fixer-upper. It was a fairly old home built in the early 1900s and situated on the outskirts of a small Sussex town on about an acre of land. When we first toured the house, the first thing that struck me was the kitchen. It looked like something out of a Charles Dickens novel. It was as small as a closet, had coarse stone floors and ancient plumbing. I remember wondering why the family who lived there previously hadn't updated the ancient kitchen. I didn't know how people could live like that. The rest of the house was fairly Spartan, with ancient carpeting and color schemes. Over time, my father would have the house remodeled, starting with the kitchen and finishing with a huge addition to the upstairs. The first day in the house, I was given the task of painting the room I would be staying in when I visited. From the front door, there was a stairway straight ahead that led up to the master bedroom. To the left, about 6 feet away, was the family room, which had a door to it, and to the right was a long hallway which led to 3 bedrooms and a bathroom at the end of the hall. My bedroom was the second to last down the hallway. I picked out blue paint to paint my room and got started immediately. That first day there, I had a very odd feeling in the house, a feeling I had never experienced before. There was an extremely heavy emotional feeling in that room, and I had a strong sensation of being watched. I was painting during a bright summer day, but there was a darkness in that room that seemed to block out all light. It's hard to explain. If pressed, I would say it was an entity, but it seemed to be all around in that room like it was part of the house. This presence was especially prevalent down that long hallway and in the bedrooms, but not so much in the rest of the house. I didn't look forward to that first night of sleep in my room. I kept the light on and read until extremely late, making as much noise as I possibly could while doing so, trying to keep my spirits up. Over the next year, this would become my weekend ritual, and I would fall asleep with a light on every night. I managed to convince myself that the noises I heard in the hallway were just creaky floorboards and noisy pipes. When I heard the stairs creaking at 3 a.m., I tried to convince myself that it was my father, despite knowing he wasn't up. Every morning I woke up in that house, safe and sound. I felt a great sense of relief. The same type of relief when you almost get in a bad car wreck but avoid it. During this time, my mother got remarried to an American who was working in the UK, and the new family, my mother and brother, moved to the US. We spent a full year in the US before it was scheduled that we would fly back to see my father in the UK. I was excited to see my father, but didn't look forward to staying in that house, as the past year in the US had been devoid of all phenomena and had been peaceful. My brother and I arrived back in England after a 10-hour plane trip. We were tired and jet-lagged beyond belief. I decided to stay up as late as possible so I would sleep through the night. My brother was overcome with tiredness and went straight to sleep. I was sitting on the sofa in the family room when there was a loud commotion in the hallway. I couldn't see what was happening exactly, but I could hear my brother, and he was extremely distressed. My father hurried from the family room out to his room, and I heard my father comforting him and trying to talk him back to bed. I felt a real sense that something was wrong, and when my father came back, I asked him what happened. He said my brother was hallucinating and had said, "Don't hit me in my soft back." I didn't know what to think, but I had a really bad feeling that something was harassing him. I felt that same thing that was bothering me about the house was distressing him. Several days passed and my brother went off to stay with my grandparents, and I was alone on the ground floor of the house. Up to this point, I experienced a general sense of unease, a noise that could be written off as the creaks of an old house. Soon this would all change, and I would experience concrete phenomena. This particular night, I followed my usual routine. I read until late at night, leaving the light on. I woke up that night in a wave of panic. There was an unearthly wind blowing through the open window on the other side of my bedroom. The curtains were flapping wildly in this gale force wind. It took me a brief moment to take stock of the situation and figure out I wasn't still in a dream. The window had been firmly closed and somehow now was wide open, with the strongest wind I had ever experienced in my entire life blowing through it. I hurriedly reached over to switch on my bedside lamp. I switched it back and forth, but it would not turn on. Panic swept over me at the prospect of going to the window, but I realized I had no choice but to go to the window in the dark and shut it. I got up and approached the window. As I got close to it, I had to use the entire force of my body to take one step at a time just to be able to move against the wind. Eventually, I made it to the window, and with great effort, pushing against this unnatural force, managed to shut it. There are several things that trouble me about this experience to this day. First, the window in that house was old, heavy, a metal frame window that if closed are literally impossible to open from anywhere but the inside. Obviously, already being scared in the house, there is absolutely no way I would leave the windows open at night. Secondly, the house I was in was surrounded by trees and was in a forest. To hamper my movement as these winds did, they must have been 60 plus miles per hour in my room. It seems totally impossible, but it did happen. Strangely, after the initial panic passed, I felt a strong sense of relief, like this was the last angry gasp of what was hanging around in that room. It didn't feel peaceful, but the malevolence that was always lingering felt like it had subsided. After that stay in the house, I went back several times to stay. At that point, my father had made an addition to the upstairs part of the house. There were several new bedrooms built up there, and I stayed in one of those every time I went. Those new rooms felt totally peaceful, and I was glad to be staying there instead of the downstairs room. Several years after my father sold the house and moved to a large country estate, where I would later have more paranormal experiences, but that's another story. Next story. This occurred back in 2005. I was a student studying in Japan, and I was invited to my friend's house in the Fukui prefecture on the western coast of Japan, one of the most haunted prefectures in the nation. It has more graves than any other location in Japan and is home to the infamous Tojimbo Cliffs, a place where people commit suicide by jumping into the ocean. I was with my friend and several of his classmates at around 2 a.m. in a family restaurant when the subject of ghost pictures came up, and several of them said they had taken pictures of the Tojimbo Cliffs and had seen the spirits that float around the area. My friend could even see them, a couple who jumped off together standing on the edge of a cliff. I didn't believe them, and I challenged them to accompany me up to the cliffs. There was 8 of us in all. About 5 of them refused to go, but the others managed to convince the 3 of them. The other 2 that had refused to go had very bad experiences there. One of them was a victim's cousin, and the other took a picture only to have the ghost cling to his shoulder and was plagued with nightmares. He saw people throwing themselves off a cliff. The nightmares continued until he visited a shrine where he was blessed and a Buddhist priest performed a ritual that would send the spirit away. In Japan, they take spirits of the past very seriously. On August 13th, 14th, and 15th, there's a national holiday called Obon, where the family goes to the family grave and light a fire of barley to lead family members back to the house so that they can protect them. Many elderly Japanese pray in the morning, offering fruit, rice, sake to their family shrine. Anyway, please forgive the detour. I'll continue with my story. The Tojimbo Cliffs can be separated into 4 main parts. The cliff itself, a red bridge where the bodies wash up, an island that the red bridge connects to the mainland, and it is said to be the resting place of the spirits of the deceased, and a statue of a Shinto god in a tunnel, which is said to show displeasure in his face if something bad will happen. We arrived at the cliffs around 3 a.m. and went directly to the cliffs. There's a total of about 10 cliffs, and we stood at the end of a cliff and looked out. I saw nothing, as did several other people, but a member of our group seemed to be losing his strength in his legs, and we had to help him walk. Then we headed over to arguably the most haunted area of the cliffs, the telephone box where many suicide victims make their last calls to their loved ones. We took a video on one of the guy's cell phones. When we played it over at the 19-second mark, we could hear a woman screaming in the back, saying, "Stop, please stop, don't do this." Needless to say, we left in a hurry after that. We headed over to the bridge, which legend has it that the hands of those who had died would reach up and cross the bridge. We didn't linger, and nor did we cross that bridge to the island. Rumors had always flown that people who went there would carry more than a single spirit. We left and went to the tunnel. We drew straws to see who would go see the statue. I was third, and when I entered, I found to my immense pleasure that the statue seemed to be smiling, like it was blessing me. However, the last member of our group was not so lucky. He came out and told us that the face showed displeasure, disgust, and hate. A few weeks later, I called my friend just to see how he and his family were doing. He immediately went into the story of the friend who was the unlucky victim of the statue. He had suffered a major breakdown, quit school, lost his job, and broke up with his longtime girlfriend, then disappeared. They found him on the island under a shrine, sobbing. Next story. Back in the early 1990s, I was newly married and we relocated from the Northeast to Atlanta, Georgia. My husband and I would hang out at the local small airport restaurant and got to know the Atlanta police chief's son. He was an FBI detective that seemed to drink too much. On the only 3 or 4 times that we met him, they would always insist that we buy a place next door to them up in Gwinnett County. I always later expressed my concern about his drinking. One Friday I asked my husband if we could take a long springtime ride up north to the wineries. He agreed and we went to sleep early. It was about 11:30 p.m. that Friday evening, and I awoke to a startling dream slash a paranormal experience, and I found myself out of my bed across the room and on the floor in shock and terrified. My dream state, I saw myself driving down the road in a truck. The truck swerved off the road suddenly and crashed into a tree. However, this dream was unusual. Upon impact, things began to slow down and I saw the crash happen in suspended animation. I heard glass and metal bending slowly in distorted, delayed tones. I experienced a vision of the entire windshield bursting into hundreds of thousands of tiny pieces of shattered glass. The shards of glass were being illuminated by the beacon of a roadside lamppost. As the front end was crushing into the tree and bent metal distorted and twisted around me, I felt myself hurled with great force out of the vehicle through the window. That's when I woke up from the dream, completely confused, shocked, and terrified that we should go anywhere in a vehicle for that weekend. Trust me, I was shaking for the rest of the night until dawn. I turned on every light in the house. I was spooked. My husband helped me calm down and promised that he would be a couch potato and watch sports all weekend, and that was fine with me. Then the call came. It was the owner of the bar restaurant that we frequented. Apparently there was a very serious accident on Friday night at approximately 11:30 p.m. in accordance to the police records. Our detective friend was intoxicated and swerved off a road about half a mile from my home. He crashed his car into a tree and was unfortunately decapitated when the impact threw him clear through the vehicle window. They asked if we would attend the funeral. The casket, due to the severity of the accident, was being kept closed. I declined, and instead just said a little prayer for him. I let him know that I knew his terror and that God would be with him. Nothing ever happened to me like that prior and has since. It was just one of those unexplainable things that happened. Next story. I moved into a small 2-up, 2-down townhouse with my 3 young children. Light and airy, it was a nice abode. I had gone through a messy divorce which had affected my babies quite a bit, but we'd gotten away and we were excited about starting our new lives in a new little rented house. On the day we moved in, I walked through the house to check for carpet burn and other items on the check sheet from the estate agent. The house was in good check and there were no objects from the previous tenants left in the house except a large glass fruit bowl that was in the kitchen. So I started to bring my bits and bobs in. After the first week of staying there, I began to feel a little uncomfortable in the house at night. And once all the kids were tucked up in bed, I felt weird sitting downstairs on my own. I figured it was probably just me being daft. So I went to bed and sat in bed with my curtains open so I could see the street. The kids' bedrooms were adjacent to mine, with a staircase between them that was enclosed and led into the kitchen. My little girl was particularly unsettled in the house and woke up a lot saying that someone was pinching her toes. I would go down and top off her drink and pass it to her and tell her to go back to sleep. This went on for a while. All night long she would wake up, "Mommy, it's pinching my toes again." I would say, "It's just a cramp, sweetheart," and pat her back off to sleep, then walk past the stairs and back to my room. On a few occasions, I'd felt uneasy doing this as I thought I'd seen someone on my stairs a few times, though I assumed I was just overtired. My mom was babysitting for me one night, and me and my new fella were off to a wedding overnight. My mom later told me that my little daughter was waking her up saying she was being pinched. So my mom had decided to sleep on my bed so that she could sort out if she woke up again. Something happened that night which I would not learn about until the day I moved. A couple of months later I decided I didn't want to be in the house any longer, as I felt not right there. I moved in with my fella and the kids into his home. On the day I moved out, my mom took me aside. She looked a little wary and I asked what was wrong. She said, "Janie, you won't be staying here at night again, will you?" "No," I replied. "Why?" She continued, "You know that night I looked after the kids?" "Yes," I replied. "Well, we had a little problem here, but I didn't want to worry you while you were still living here." "What are you on about?" I asked, with a smile on my face. My mom is as straight as they get, so I have to believe her. "That night, I had the kids. I was laying on your bed, as Faye kept waking up and I was having to keep running up and down the stairs. Well, I must have dropped off to sleep, but then I woke up to this really loud noise of what sounded like a lot of people running up the stairs. I sat up with a start to find three people, one woman and two men, standing at the bottom of your bed. I could barely speak, and I didn't know what to say. I just managed to ask, What do you want?" The woman replied to my mom, "We have come to get my glass bowl." My mom said, "I'm sorry, you will have to leave. This isn't my house, and you shouldn't be here." At which point they all three turned and seemed to drift silently out of the room and down the stairs. My mom was crying and utterly petrified. She waited a while and called my dad on her cell phone to come around. They turned all the lights on and checked around, but there was no forced entry or anything. My mom was horrified as she knew now that she had seen something that wasn't right. She had kept us quiet because she had not wanted to frighten me, as she knew I was unsettled there anyway. After hearing this, I replied to her, "Mom, did you know that the only thing that was in the house when I moved in was that big old glass bowl in the kitchen?" Well, she had not known this and she gasped. My blood just ran cold. Needless to say, I moved out gladly and made sure the bowl was kept nice and safe in case our visitors should come back again. After moving out, I asked the landlord of the house if the bowl was his. He said, "No, it was here when we bought the property, so we just left it here for tenants to use." "Could I trouble you further and ask you who owned the house before?" I asked. "Why, yes," he replied. "It was owned by a lady who lived here with her two grown-up sons. After she died, the sons sold the house and moved away, and I bought it." I replied, "Well, I think she still lives here." I gave him a smile and thanked him for the rent of the house. He looked quite stunned and shouted, "Oh, my life, don't tell the estate agents. No one will want to rent it." Since I moved out there, my little girl has not once complained about her toes being pinched. Next story. When I was little, my mom had finally rented a house after many years of living in an apartment. When we got to that house, I remember that I got the weirdest feeling, but I just ignored it. Later, when my mom and I got settled in the house, I started seeing weird things and hearing odd sounds. I really paid no attention. I was young and I just figured it was my imagination. As years passed, I started having nightmares and hearing sounds more and more, and I started waking up with scratches on my body. My friends hated staying there, but I had one friend that would always stay there with me, so I wasn't alone. She had seen some things too. One night when we were at my house alone because my mom went out for the night, we kept hearing footsteps and voices. We thought it was my mom and one of her friends, but no one was there. So we just ignored the sounds and eventually they went away. When we were trying to go to sleep, I woke up my friend because she was screaming. She had told me that she saw my bedroom door open, and when she saw no one on the other side, she screamed and the door shut. We didn't get much sleep after that. One of the times I remember because it just burned into my head. It happened on a Saturday morning when I woke up to watch TV. Well, the dog I had at the time was with me, and we would play a game where I would hide under a blanket calling him and he would try to crawl under. While I was playing this, I was under the blanket and I could hear my dog running around, and then I heard footsteps slowly walking up to me. Thinking it was my mom, I just kept playing. Then for a second I heard my dog run behind me, and then I felt a hand grab my arm and pull me. When I ripped my arm back and took the blanket off my head, I saw that my dog was in a corner shaking. It took me 5 minutes to get him to come out to me. I was pretty creeped out too. I told my mom, but she never believed me. I had to live with that for 4 years. I was thankful when we moved.